morning, dear students, and welcome back to this session. In this session, we are going to continue with our discussion of composition writing. And already I have explained you what generally a composition is. And now we are going to discuss the different aspects of how to write a good composition. Now, any good composition, that should be divided into three essential parts. That is, you must have an appropriate introduction. The second part of the composition is the body part, where the topic given in the question is discussed in detail, and this particular part can be divided into several paragraphs. And then finally is the conclusion, where we sum up our discussion and arrive at a resolution or conclude our essay or composition. Now, in order to write a good composition, there are three important features that are necessary. So, the three important features necessary for writing a good composition are appropriate subject matter. You must select an appropriate composition or topic on which you have some knowledge. So there must be appropriate subject matter. Then the ideas which occur in your mind, that should be included in that composition. Those ideas should be logically arranged. So the second important aspect is the logical arrangement of those ideas, and the third most important factor is effective expression. You must be able to express your ideas, or you must be able to impress your ideas upon the readers through expressive language. Say you are given a number of choice. Now, after deciding on a particular topic, the first thing that you must do is that you must jot down the ideas as they occur to you in your mind. So after deciding on a particular topic, think on the topic and then write down the ideas as they occur to you. For example, if you are writing a composition titled as A Journey by Car, then start by recalling a particular car journey. Start by recalling a particular car journey that you had in the recent past or in the remote past, and make a list of ideas. Now this ideas is the framework. Not in detail you have to write, just the key points or the key words you mention. So recall the car journey, list your ideas such as reason for the journey, the preparation and departure, on the road experience, traffic and pedestrian, some incidents, interesting incidents that happened during the course of the journey. Then you have a flat tire. Then you take the help of the farmers to mend that flat tire. Then you stop at a wayside restaurant for food. So how was the food in the restaurant? What type of people you met in the restaurant? The scenery that you witnessed on your way, the storm towards the end, the reaction, what was your reaction, what time you arrived, and after your arrival, as usual, you are tired after that journey, but at the same time you are glad that you had such a wonderful journey. So you comment on the journey. So this way you jot down your ideas and then develop those ideas in your composition. Now suppose these ideas do not flow spontaneously to you. Now after reading the topic, suppose these ideas do not flow spontaneously to you, then ask yourself a series of questions about the title and then see whether those questions suggest you something or not. So this plan is called the WH plan. What type of questions are we supposed to ask? We make use of some WH words to ask yourself some questions like where, when, why, how, who, what. Suppose let us take the example of the same composition, a journey by car. Now if ideas are not flowing spontaneously, what are we supposed to do? We will follow the WH plan. So ask yourself, how did the various people whom you had met during the course of the journey, they behave? How were they dressed? Okay. So that can be described. When, you can ask when the journey took place, whether it was morning, evening. So you can ask various questions to yourself with reference to time. Where had you been? You were passing by the city, or you were passing by the village street. So you can present a contrasting picture between the city and the countryside. So why did you undertake that journey? Why there were various people on the road? Why did you talk to them? What made you talk to them? Why did you require their help? So these type of questions if you raise, you will get a fair idea about the composition. Now two more important, or the two most important aspects of any good composition are its beginning and its end. So always remember, we need to start a composition in an appropriate way, and it should be concluded in an appropriate way. If you do not begin your composition in an interesting way, then the reader will hardly be encouraged to read your full composition. You should arouse that curiosity in the reader in the beginning itself. So your composition should be compelling on the reader, that the reader should feel encouraged to read further. And on the other hand, if your conclusion is weak, if your end to the composition is weak, you will lose to gain a favorable impression of the reader. Though you may have discussed the topic in an elaborative way, but then also you will lose a favorable response of the reader if you do not conclude your essay in an appropriate way. Now the first paragraph of any composition serves as the purpose of introduction to the topic. Now this introduction, when we say introduction, what does it mean? That means what? We are supposed to introduce the topic that we are going to discuss to the readers. Now this introduction may consist of a definition or an explanation of the title or the topic, or it can also say how or the way in which you are going to treat the subject matter. Now the first sentence, the very first sentence, the first impression that you are going to create on the reader's mind is by the use of your first statement in the introduction. Now this first line itself should be an arresting statement. Arresting statement, what do we mean by arresting statement? That means it must capture the attention of the readers at once. The very first statement should arouse the reader's curiosity and compel them to read the composition further. So in other words, we can say that the opening sentence of any composition should be so arranged that as to attract the reader's attention. Now for this purpose, we may use different ways. Like for example, we can start a composition with a question. Okay. Say suppose your topic is women are more emotional than compared to men. Okay. And suppose if you are arguing against the topic, saying that men are also emotional, so you can begin the question composition with the line, who says that men do not cry? So that way means it's an arresting statement, at once holds the attention of the readers, and then we go on to discuss, or we slowly introduce the topic. Okay. Now you can also make use of surprise element, or what we say shock tactics. Okay. That gives a shock. Say for example, if you say education does more harm than good. Okay, education does more harm than good. Now this is a shock tactics. Okay. All criminals should be hanged. And you can also make use of words. Another way of starting a composition is making use of appropriate words to create an atmosphere. Now this type of introduction is very befitting for story type of composition, when you are narrating a story, original or imaginative story. Now if you recall, many stories you have read. Okay. Now in those stories, you see, the writer creates a befitting atmosphere for the story in the beginning of the story, which serves as the purpose of exposition. So a background, a setting is created. And how that setting is created? By making use of appropriate words. If you have read the story The Tiger in the Tunnel, you'll see in that particular story there is a character named as Baldo, who meets with a tragedy of his life. He is killed by a man-eater tiger. But though the story is about the man-eater tiger and Baldo about his encounter, but still the author begins the story by creating an atmosphere, an airy atmosphere, by describing the forest, by taking the time of the action to be night. So an airy atmosphere is created in the beginning, which foreshadows the tragedy that is going to befall on the life of Baldo. So we can use that technique also for stories. You can also start your composition with a witty idea or a phrase, by say that by a witty maxim that honesty is the best policy. Okay. Or you can say a stitch in time saves nine. So a witty idea or a maxim, you can begin your composition. And you can also make use of a quotation to start your composition. Okay. But the quotation should be right, and it should be very much relevant to the topic. And it is also acceptable that we start a composition with an anecdote or a short story that may be related to our topic of discussion. So these are the different ways in which we can start. But remember that the very opening line of the composition should be an arresting statement, so as to hold the attention of the readers. Never make use of any flat sentence for starting your composition, because that flat sentence hardly encourages the readers to read further. And then the ending of the composition is also very important. It is essentially a part of the composition which the reader sees the last, and there the readers create an impression about the composition. So it is inappropriate to leave yourself inadequate time to end the composition. You must manage your time very properly, and you must make it very clear in your mind that suppose if we are supposed to spend 35 minutes for writing the composition, so 5 minutes for writing the plan, okay, 10 minutes for the introduction, then 10 minutes for body part, 10 minutes for conclusion. So that way you have to judiciously make the division of time, and you must have sufficient time in your hand to wind up the composition, to conclude your composition. So end is often more important than the beginning. Okay. So it is in the end of the composition that you are able to create an impression on the mind of the readers. So avoid making use of sentences like in conclusion, so it can be seen that I would like to conclude. Such type of sentences should be avoided, because it means that as if you are trying to say that this is my conclusion. There is no need for you to state that. The paragraph itself must be evident enough that it is the conclusion to the composition. Okay. So this is all about writing of good composition. So I hope things are clear to you. Thank you and stay blessed.